Inquisitor Coteaz was one of the first miniatures I ever painted, and it was truly badass. Only eclipsed by the even more badass artwork on the cover of the Codex Demon Hunters. Nothing to me spelled Warhammer 40k more than this character, and I remember painting the model like it was yesterday, even though it was over 20 years ago. When I saw the silhouette pop up in my emails, I was really excited.
I know what this is. It's happening.
Oh hell yeah. Yeah. Oh god no, what is this?
Look how they massacred my boy.
Overall, it just doesn't have the commanding presence the old model and the artwork are oozing. It looks more like a comedic relief character. And I know I complained a lot about too much detail in this video, but my god, Games Workshop, you didn't have to get rid of all the detail on this one. But in this video, I'm going to kitbash the shit out of the new model, and I'll try to come up with something that does the character justice. But I'm not going to lie, this one is going to be one hell of a challenge. Okay, well, let's do this. Conversions don't just start with making the first cut. It involves a lot of planning ahead before you even put a nipper to that sweet plastic crack. And in this case, there's a few factors that would influence my game plan. First of all, converting Games Workshop minis isn't what it used to be in the 2000s. Nowadays, the models have so many parts that integrate into each other while assembling, you actually do need to read that little booklet that comes with it, which is made almost impossible for me by the fact that I have a Y chromosome.
If it still doesn't work out, then you don't deserve to have said item.
So I need to assemble a lot of this model before I start the conversion. A good example is the legs coming in two parts. I obviously have to glue these together, even if I have to later cut them apart in different places. But not only that, the torso is also connected to the feet, and then there's a way how the left arm integrates with the cape and so on. And that leads us to the second thought that goes into my kit bashes. I try to keep as many parts of the original I can, even if I have to alter them. Simply because this helps so much with keeping the proportions of the body parts credible, because you don't have to mix that many different kits. The biggest crime committed here is obviously the legs. The model looks like he broke both of them in multiple places, and now he's wearing an oversized cast and he has to walk around like that. I don't know where the concept of these giant legs even comes from. Maybe it's because both the iconic artworks I painted viewing him slightly from below. You would hope that Games Workshop is aware of the concept of perspective and things close to you appearing bigger than things further away, but I'm not so sure anymore. Here's the new concept. Oh, big legs, tiny head, got it. While the leg's girth is simply too big, the other proportions like the length of the individual elements is still okay. So I started to simply cut them down, basically carving new legs out of the old ones. I started slimming down the feet until I was happy, and then simply took them as a guide for how much I had to cut away from the rest of the legs. First using broad cuts and then slowly fine-tuning the shape by gradually scraping away material with my blades. I tried to come up with something a little more intriguing, similar to the more gothic shape of the legs in the art, so I flattened the shin area, hoping that this would make it look more interesting. Once I was happy with the rough shape of the lower legs, I cut them off so I could later repose them to my liking and proceeded with the upper legs, getting rid of all the ornaments, reducing them to simple cylinders, and trimming them down just like the rest. At this point, I had to make a decision for the pose, and I wanted to base it loosely on this artwork, so I built a small platform for the right foot that is taking a step forward to be slightly elevated. The way these minis assemble leaves them hollow, so I quickly filled the holes with sprue material and then drilled holes so I could add pins. This would help with finding the right pose and keep the final mini more stable. When doing kit bashing, we're basically trying to solve a puzzle. I usually have a goal in mind, and there's many parts that need to be pieced together a certain way to achieve that goal. I just have to find which is the best, but also the most efficient one to get to the desired result. I have the benefit of being a sculptor, and I can replace certain puzzle pieces with pieces I make from scratch. But it's still a lot faster to find a part that fits. The good thing is I didn't have to look too far, because the Stormcast sculpts become a universal solution for most of the things I do in 40k nowadays for some reason. Coteaz is wearing artificer armor, and this chest plate would be a perfect fit for that, with the detailed pec muscles and rivets. And I know I'm gonna straight up contribute to Nipplegate here, but you'll have to deal with that. I cut off all the parts I didn't need from the Stormcast chest and slowly cut down Coteaz's chest until it slotted right in there and felt natural proportion-wise. At that point I felt comfortable to lock in the pose, and since all the elements had holes and pins in it, I could just put everything together like this and fiddle around until I was happy. And a few drops of super glue into the joints fixed it in place. This video is sponsored by JudoGrid and their printable modular display system. This is not just a display case, it's a display system that will conform to your needs. Completely customizable, you can build it to any size you need and load it with tons of different accessories to display anything from miniatures, action figures, comics, cards and any other collectible you can think of. Need a place to store your brushes or paints? JudoGrid has you covered. Heck, you could even build a giant paint rack from this. The modular pegboard backing even allows for custom accessories development in case your needs evolve further down the line. There's a lot of additional options already unlocked in the stretch goals, and the team is constantly grabbing new suggestions and developing them. There's even one of these fancy LED supports in there. Pretty cool. The system is 100% modular, so if you need to expand your display in the future because these 40k armies just keep growing larger and larger for some reason, you can simply print some additional pieces, or you can even split one giant display into a couple of smaller ones. Everything is super easy to assemble, it simply clicks together and can expand to any size based on your display needs. The pegboard elements have a locking mechanism and fasteners, so even very heavy collectibles will be 100% secure. This is a digital STL campaign, but if you would like to purchase a physical JudoGrid system in the future, you can sign up at the top of the Kickstarter page and they will hook you up. The campaign is already fully funded with tons of stretch goals unlocked. Go check it out using my link in the description. There's still a few early bird pledges available, so don't hesitate and grab this awesome display system for the cheapest it will ever be. And I know it might not look like much, but this step is a big accomplishment in the process, because now I can focus more on the detailing, filling all the gaps and fleshing out the armor details. Like the armor plates and the mechanics of the knee joints, and I widened some parts on the chest plate, mainly because the Stormcast armor is not as chunky as 40k armor. This also made some room for the detail I had to put into the abdominal area to make it closer to the artwork. Creating some armor plates with putty and also fitting in that belt part that wraps under the Inquisitor symbol. I really liked how the lower leg armor turned out in that chunkier style, but the knees had to be tuned down so I could fit the skulls on without going right back to the clumsiness of the original. So after I rounded the knee part, I put down 2 blobs of putty. When I sculpt skulls, I usually follow the same formula, getting the outer shape roughly right, then pressing in eyes with a round tool, getting the hard edges right like around the eye sockets and some initial nose detail, and then adding a hole in the middle with a fine needle, pressing the material up to form the bridge of the nose. I wanted the leg ornaments to look very close to the artworks, something the original Mini completely ditched, which is not a real surprise with the general lack of detail in 40k at the moment. So I put down the general shape of the inquisitorial eye, and I also added the spikes from the art around the skulls. I'm jumping around between different parts of the Mini at this point, but that is mainly due to waiting on the sculpting material to cure. Basically, I'm waiting for the eye shapes on the shins to set, so I can add further detail. Meanwhile, I did add the purity seal that's wrapping around his leg in the art, rolling out a small portion of Magic Sculpt, and adding the roll to the leg before pressing it flat with my color shaper, making it overlap here and there and adding some dents for extra detail. And once the base for my Inquisitor symbols was cured, I added in the last detail still missing. To build the right arm, I looked through my bits box to find a stretched out version, and this leftover piece I had from the Space Marine Captain with Jump Pack was more than perfect. I only had to angle it slightly different and cut off the hand with the chainsaw. Or so I thought. And ultimately, I could have just used any other Space Marine upper arm, because I also switched the lower arm for the original. Again, this is a good example for trying to solve the puzzle. Piecing together these existing parts was a lot easier than resculpting the bigger plates on the forearm where the eagle is sitting on. Then once again I pinned everything so I could reposition the elements to find the perfect pose before I glued the arm in place. This process might look tedious, but it has proven the best way to reduce the headache while finding poses. Coincidentally, the hand holding the hammer also had the perfect shape to represent a hand that was releasing an eagle. I just had to liberate it from the blunt force instrument it was holding and get rid of some of the material. Then I glued that shit right on. It's always uplifting to find pieces that are the perfect fit for a problem you're trying to solve. I did consider Stormcast legs initially, but they were too flimsy to replace the original legs. However, they were just right to add detail to the arms. In this case, I used the need to build the elbow part on the new arm to look closer to the original armor design. I popped a new cap on the back of the hammer and made it a little prettier so I could use it again, having the other hand hold it, and then went on to the next element, which was the cloak. Again, it would be way easier to use this existing part without having to destroy another kit. I just had to make it conform to the new pose better, especially the stretched out arm. I also got rid of the fur on the back because I was just not sure yet if I wanted to add that element in the final result. I popped the cloak back on using a chunk of putty, and when that was cured, I added more and more material to reconstruct the parts I cut away. I was looking at a few heads to find the perfect one, because I wanted to portray my Coteaz a bit closer to the older, white-haired version on the Codex cover art, so I picked a more haggard looking face. But I didn't want it to look too frail, so I landed on the Space Marine head that I de-Space Marinified a bit before fitting it in. I couldn't find a proper loincloth that would slot into the area and also had a fold structure I liked, so I decided to do one myself. This process usually has 3 stages. First, I roll out the sheet of putty on a glass surface and let it cure a bit so it's more sturdy and doesn't rip when cutting it. Then I cut it in shape, which requires to occasionally fit it to the mini to see if the size and shape works. The second step is to integrate the sheet with the sculpt, and as I do that, sometimes I realize I need to cut the sheet down further. The next step requires this to have hardened, so meanwhile I dry fitted the other arm and eventually glued it in place. The shoulder guard that came with it was usable, but I customized it a bit. And then I used a small blob of putty to hold it in place. To finish off the loincloth, I added some additional folds, mainly that big one in the front, and that rounds out the 3-step program. Again, I had the option to do the second shoulder guard from scratch, but landed on a Stormcast bit instead, as it turned out to be the perfect fit. I cleaned all the heraldry and rivets, and then just glued it on upside down and filled a few gaps. Like I said, I wanted the hair to be more in the style of the Codex version, so I built the receding hairline first, and then bulked out the rest, with some strains also falling over the armor. Then I started to define the bulk of the hair, before going more and more into detail with finer tools. And after that, I tried to mirror the icon on the right shoulder to the left to draw everything together. I thought about plastering the base with skulls and spikes like in the artwork, but I decided to dial that down and just have a pile of bones that supported the feeling of him stepping up a small slope, and then detailed the rest of the base. Then there was only one thing left to do: mounting the eagle on the arm, and I think it turned out really gloriously.